Okay, so I have to read the disclaimer. So this information presented in this webinar is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or insurance advice. The content shared is intended to provide general knowledge and awareness about life insurance, estate planning, and wealth building strategies. Individual circumstances vary and results are not guaranteed. Life insurance products, coverage, and eligibility are subject to underwriting approval and may vary by state. So please consult with a licensed professional. And it just so happens that I am a licensed professional. So all strategy, framework, methodology, formula, content, and all associated materials are the proprietary intellectual property of me, Crystal L. Gunn, Archer Wealth Group, and the Financial Wisdom Institute. So all rights are reserved. Unauthorized use, reproduction, distribution, or representation of this framework or its components in whole or in part is strictly prohibited. So before we go any further, I do want to set the stage for what you can expect tonight. So we're going to walk through some history because the history matters. And we're going to have some conversation in the chat, right, and create space for you to reflect and engage. And then we'll move into life insurance, the knowledge, the education, so that you can understand how all of that works, understand it a little more, right? And throughout that process, I'm going to give you a little strategy and things for you to think about as it relates to your family and your life. So we'll also briefly touch on some legacy planning tools because this is bigger than just insurance. And then I'll share a few announcements before we close. So we are recording. So if you need to step away at any point, you will definitely receive the copy of this recording in an email within the next 24 to 48 hours. So you came here tonight because something called you. And before we go any further, I want you to honor that. So don't overthink it. Don't try to logically process everything that is happening. Just be open, be present, be aware of what comes up for you, what resonates, what challenges you, what feels familiar, and even if you can't explain why. Because this isn't just information, this is awareness. This is healing. It's remembering and it's reclamation, right? And your body will let you know what matters. So as we move through this tonight, listen differently. And so I want to start off by saying, give yourself some grace, right? And I talk to people all of the time and they beat themselves up. They feel, guilty, ashamed for their money situation and what is happening. But I want to say, give yourself some grace. And so as you've gone again through that financial journey, you look back over it and all of these things come up. But everyone has a first personal financial relationship. Wasn't defined by you and it doesn't work in your favor. It was defined by what you inherited generationally. And I'm not talking about assets. It was defined by what you saw and what you didn't see modeled in your house, what you were taught, what you weren't taught, what you were told, and what you overheard when you shouldn't have been listening in the first place, and then made up some scenario in your mind based off of what you overheard, what you saw in your community, in your church, in your schools, in your extended family, what happened to you in your life, the traumas, the mishaps, the losses, the failures, music, TV, social media, movies, all of it. Designing your personal financial relationship, and it doesn't work in your favor. So part of what I do is I help you heal and redefine that personal financial relationship. And when you do that, right, you then get to live the life that you desire and deserve. And I always say deserve because we've been conditioned to desire much less than we deserve. So we're going to start with a little history. And so we have to go back and we have to look back because Sankofa teaches us that that's a must. We have to go back and retrieve what was lost in order to move forward correctly and with clarity. And that's what we're going to do next. And so we're going to start with the original currency out of West Africa, the manila. So the manila was the original West African bracelet shaped currency made of brass and copper, and it became one of the earliest and most widely used general purpose currencies across West Africa. It was worn on the body by women on their wrists and their ankles to display their husband's wealth. They wore manillas. The more worn, the more wealthy the family. Copper was considered the red gold of Africa. It was used for everyday market purchases, for bride price, for paying for paying fines, and for compensation. And it was even used as burial money, buried with the dead so that the wealth would travel to the next world. That is what they thought, and that is what they believed. But abundance was never meant to stop at death. That was just tradition. That was a belief that wealth continues, that what you build, what you carry, what you create doesn't end with you. So when we talk about life insurance, we're not introducing a new idea. We're returning to an old one. We're returning to the belief that your life and your wealth should continue beyond you. And then the Europeans arrived. So Portuguese explorers arrived in the 1470s and found manillas already in wide use along the West African coast. They went back to Europe to manufacturers and had manillas mass produced, not for adornment, but for trade. So by the early 1500s, manillas were being used to purchase enslaved people. As demand grew, prices inflated to 50 to 57 manillas per person, and the King of Portugal capped it at 40 manillas per person to control inflation. The manila became so central for slave trade that it was literally called slave trade money. They took what our ancestors wore as wealth and turned it into a price tag on human life. And then in 1948, the British government launched Operation Manila. They confiscated and melted down over 32 million pieces of ancestral West African currency. They paid 1.6 million in 1948, worth over 21.8 million today. And they did that to erase the evidence. Then they passed a law making it illegal for any individual to possess more than 200 manillas. They didn't just erase the currency, they criminalized holding on to it and holding on to our ancestral symbol of wealth. But even after all of that, something remained. The hip hop artist draping himself in gold chains, the elder wearing copper bangles for healing, the women stacking bracelets on her wrists. They are all reaching back towards something they can't even fully name, but their body remembers. Manillas weren't just currency, they were wealth worn on the body, abundance made visible, status, power, and prosperity displayed through adornment. They melted down the manila, but they couldn't melt down the memory. It lives in every gold chain, every copper bangle, every bracelet stacked on a wrist. The body remembered what history tried to erase. And when the body remembers, it eventually seeks to restore. And that wasn't the only way. This global monetary system was built on our backs, and every understanding of it changes how we see everything that comes next. So life insurance, it was created. It covered ships, cargo, and other assets. It was designed to protect financial loss. So if a ship was lost at sea or goods were destroyed, there was a policy in place to compensate and protect the owner, the family, their wealth, and their legacy, because abundance was never meant to stop at loss. And so as slavery expanded and enslaved people were forced to perform dangerous labor, slave owners needed protection on their investment. So since enslaved people were already classified as property, insuring them fit right into the existing insurance framework. And that's is when slave insurance exploded. And then when enslaved people died, sometimes from the very conditions of their labor and sometimes from something far more deliberate, the slave owner collected as the beneficiary, building wealth off the death of our ancestors, not our ancestors' families, but the families of those who enslaved them. And it wasn't isolated. The entire system built on the backs of our ancestors with institutions behind all of it. And many of those institutions still exist today. And this wasn't just about insurance. Between 1831 and 1865, over 13,000 enslaved people were accepted by banks and financial institutions as collateral for loans. So they insured us because they saw our value. They used us as collateral because they saw our value. They built their generational wealth on our backs because they saw our value. So the disgust, the hate, the manipulation, it was so harsh because the value of us outweighed everything else. The very intensity of their actions was a confession. They knew what we were worth. The question is not whether you have the value. The question is, when will you fully claim it? Because this is why you're here, to reclaim what was always yours, to use the very systems and make them work for you and your family. So that what you do after tonight doesn't just change your life. It clears what was carried before you and protects what will come after you. They knew it. Now it's time for you to know it and act on it. So I want to pause for a moment because I know that was a lot. And I know for some, something came up. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's frustration, maybe it's sadness or even confusion. And all of that is valid. But this right here is where the shift begins because awareness is the first step. And the healing that comes from that awareness is what leads to true liberation. So before we move forward, I want you to turn inward, right? Turn inward. And so what we're going to do right now is it's not just a webinar. This is a gathering. And it's what we do throughout history. There have always been multiple liberation movements, the civil rights movement, the sexual liberation movement, the digital revolution, and others. And we have benefited from all of those movements, but not fully and never really financially. And that's the gap. And that's the piece that's been missing. So I created the gathering, right? Because that's what we're doing. And it's a liberation movement for the culture because historically we came together in community to have conversations, to build, to unify, to grow individually and collectively. But somewhere along the way, those conversations, they stopped, especially about the ones about money. And most of us have not had real financial conversations with our families. So anytime we come together like this to have these conversations, we are gathering for healing, gathering for building, gathering for unity, and gathering for liberation. And because we've gone through so much already tonight, I want to create a space for that. Not for commentary, not for reaction, not about them or what was done. This is about you. What are you really feeling right now? So again, let's turn inward and drop those feelings into the chat. I love it. Someone said definitely came in by accident, but it is instantly answering a prayer. I'm angry right now, yet relieved. Curiosity, I feel it in my eyes. First time hearing this. Someone else said in my stomach. Someone else said bothered. Someone else said disgust is what I feel. Heavy in my chest, mixed emotions. Worked in insurance for 25 years and never knew we were the collateral. Feeling angry, misled, grateful. Yeah, all of that. I feel it in my gut pain. Our people murdered and they got paid. Yeah. I can't even bring my brain to understand the amount of money they received, right? And all of this that you're experiencing, all of it. And thank you for all of that. Because it's not easy. But all of it that you are experiencing, our nervous system responds to historical financial trauma. And you feel it, whether you know it or not. You remember it. And remember what I said earlier. Your personal financial relationship wasn't defined by you and it doesn't work in your favor. Because everything we've talked about tonight so far is still showing up in your money story. And so you being here today matters more than you may have realized when you registered. So I applaud you for showing up, for staying present, and for allowing yourself to see all of this and to feel all of this. Because once you become aware, something shifts. And from that point forward, you don't get to unsee any of it. So now what? You heard all of this. You felt all of this. You've seen all of this. Again, so now what? Knowing all of this does nothing. Knowing all of this, I'm sorry, and doing nothing is absolutely not an option that you or your lineage can afford. So I'm going to ask you something else. We're going to go back to the chat. Drop in the chat one thing you would do differently for your lineage after tonight. Differently. So can somebody put their self on mute? Heal. That's the biggest piece. Thank you, Sonia, for that. Heal. Because one healed person changes everything. Spread the word. Educate. Start. Absolutely. Make up for what was lost. Again, thank you for sharing in the comments or in the chat. So how many of you have heard of this? The Great Wealth Transfer. Probably heard about it on social media, where they say up to $84 trillion are expected to transfer over the next 25 years. And when we look at the wealth gap today, the median white household holds nearly 8 to 10 times more wealth than the median Black household. It's why I do the work that I do, and why you being here this evening matters. And what you do from this day forward plays a major role in your legacy. Because one thing we know for sure, the great wealth transfer will not close the racial wealth gap. It will only widen it. And so this is a life insurance webinar, and we've talked history, and now we're going to talk life insurance. But we're going to talk about it my way. And this is what I teach, the Manila Band strategy. This is my framework. I'm not saying that anybody else doesn't do this, but it's just what I think and the way I teach it. And please note the historical context in the title, the Manila Band's strategy, built on history, secured for legacy. So we protect the people, we protect the income, we protect the assets, and we protect the legacy. We protect the people because the people matter. Every individual in the life, in the family has value. So we make sure everyone is covered. as early as possible. And we protect the income because if your income is what runs the household or even helps to run the household, what happens when it's no longer there? So we protect it. We protect the assets, the things that you own, your home, the expensive truck or car that you own or are buying. We protect what you've built so that those who come after you don't lose it. And we also use the tool to help build even more assets. And we protect the legacy because you should be thinking at least 10 generations deep and teaching every generation to do the same. So too often people are underinsured because they are not looking at all four of these areas. And every single one of these areas matter. So how many policies do you believe one person needs? Drop it in the chat. That's a great question, Ms. Shaw. What if you can't get everyone in your family on board? We're going to come back to that. Don't let me forget. So, how many policies does a person need? We got 1, 4, 2, 1, 1, 1. Thank you, Sabrina. As many as necessary. That answer is always going to be different for everyone because of your own personal strategy and what you are trying to accomplish. What works for one is not going to work for all, right? So, as many policies to create the strategy for you, your life, and your legacy. That's really the answer, right? And I want to stop here and say that most people, and you will probably have experienced this, especially if you've tried to talk to somebody in your family about life insurance and they have not been happy about it. Because most people think about life insurance and they think that it's just for death, and it's not. It's really about life, and it's actually in the name, life insurance. So we should be using it, and the conversation shouldn't be centered around death. It should be centered around life and liberation. So let's dig into some of the tools of liberation. And as I go through them, drop any comments that you have, because I'm going to go through these on a high level, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of strategy on how you can think about using each one of them. So any questions that you have as I go through them, drop them in the chat, and we're going to come back and I'm going to look at them afterwards. So term insurance is exactly what it sounds like. It's coverage for a specific period of time, 10, 20, 30 years. There's no cash value. This is just pure protection. And the policy only pays out if you pass during that term. So here's how I use it when we talk about that manila band strategy. We use term to protect assets. So if you have a 30-year mortgage, you get a 30-year term policy for the amount of that mortgage, right? And I'm talking about life insurance, not credit insurance. And so if you had a $200,000 mortgage and then that $200,000 term policy, and let's say you've already paid down $100,000 of that mortgage and something happens to you when you pass, $100,000 pays off the home because that's what you owe, and the remaining $100,000 goes towards your family. That's protection plus support. Why a term policy in this case when covering assets? Because it's usually far less expensive premium amounts. So in term is also great if that's all that somebody can afford right now. So it allows you to get covered while you're building your financial position to put other policies in place. And then there's permanent life insurance. And it's coverage for your entire life, from the day you get it until the day you die, usually to about 102 years old. And I believe everybody should have a permanent policy. Again, my belief. You can hear something different elsewhere, but my belief is everybody should have a permanent policy because it removes the risk of trying to get coverage later when health changes or affordability becomes an issue. So the earlier you get it, the more affordable the premiums are, which is one of the reasons I teach getting policies early on children. 7 days, 14 days old, they should have a policy. Now, permanent policies also can build cash value, whether it's whole life, index universal life, or fixed universal life. They build cash value over time. And that cash can be used while you're living to start a business, to supplement retirement, to create opportunities. The younger you start, the longer runway that money has to grow. And then there's final expense or burial insurance. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's designed to cover end of life expenses. Typically smaller policies under 30 grand, sometimes more. This is for someone who may have not had coverage before, and then they just want to make sure their family isn't left trying to figure things out during times of grief. Group life insurance. It's typically what you get through your job or through certain organizations. It's easier to get. No questions asked because the risk is spread through the group. So there's no medical exam, which means the cost could be lower. So most people, if you're employed, you have life insurance through your work or your employer's group policy. And I believe that life insurance through your job is not enough. I always say it doesn't count. It's like the extra point in basketball, right? If you have it, it's great, right? But what happens if you leave that job? Or if they ask you to leave and now you're in between jobs, waiting for benefits to kick in on the new job, you're exposed at that time. So what if something happens to you and that was the only type of policy you had in your place? Now your family is left at risk. So you must have coverage outside of your job. And so group coverage through work is great, but it should never, ever be the only plan. Accidental death and dismemberment, A, D, and D. And this type of policy pays a benefit only if death or serious injury is caused by an accident. And that policy will clearly outline what qualifies as an accident and what type of injuries are covered. So this is not full coverage. It is very, very, very specific. Guaranteed life insurance. And on the surface, it sounds like exactly what it says. No matter your condition, it's a guaranteed policy. Nope. In reality, most carriers still have some level of qualification. They may ask questions around things like cancer, heart conditions, or other major illnesses like renal failure, things of that nature, to determine if they'll issue the policy and how much coverage you'll receive. And in many cases, there's a waiting period, right? After that policy is enforced. Usually it's around 2 years, which means if something happens to you and you die during that time, the full death benefit may not be paid out, only a return of premium. And remember earlier when I talked about group insurance, how the risk is spread, right, across that entire group. So I have an organization called the Amazing Woman Network, and we offer group coverage. And it is a true guaranteed issue policy. There are no medical exams, no medical questions, no disqualifiers. When you sign up this month, that policy takes effect next month. And you do not have to be a member of the Amazing Woman Network to access it. I made sure it was opened up to friends and families and the community at large, because sometimes this is the exact type of coverage that we need. Hey, Celeste, can you put your phone on mute? On mute, please. Whole life with long-term care. This is one of the specific policies that I'm talking about. You can find long-term care policies elsewhere, right? And so specifically, what whole life with long-term care is, it is a permanent whole life policy combined with long-term care. And so if you ever find yourself in a long-term care situation, say you need to be in a nursing home, where you can't, or any type of situation where you cannot perform two of the six activities of daily living, you can access the money from the policy while you're still living. And that money comes directly to you. Doesn't go to the facility, it comes to you so that you can do with that money what you need to do with it, and you can focus on healing and not your finances. Okay. There are also cancer policies. Under that group policy that we have, there's also a cancer policy, but you also probably have seen cancer policies through your employer benefits as well. The policy that we have pays $10,000 lump sum for initial diagnosis, and then pays additional benefits for hospital stays, treatment, travel, lodging, and so much more. If you currently have cancer, you can still get a policy, but you cannot file that initial claim on that existing diagnosis. There's also things called critical illness policies, and they may pay a lump sum of benefits for events like heart attack, stroke, loss of sight, dementia, a whole host of reasons, plus other type of treatment. And again, this money comes directly to you, not to the hospitals, not to the providers, not to the doctors, to you to use however you need. So we do have whole life, long-term care, cancer, and critical illness policies that are offered through the Amazing Woman Network. And that information is in the chat. But you also can look through your own employer group and see, can't you get them? There's also an annuity, which is not a life insurance policy, but is offered through life insurance companies. And it's another financial product that we use in strategies. Annuities are designed to provide guaranteed income, typically in retirement, and life insurance agents can help you create that. I've been successful in helping people. You know how you have a job previously and you had money going into a 401k, and then you left that job and now that money is just sitting over there? Well, you can roll that into an annuity to get it from sitting over there and actually working in your favor. You can also start one and contribute to it. Again, just setting up money for later. Okay, let's roll into what determines your premium. Age. The younger you are, the more affordable your premiums are. And typically because you're at a lower risk. So it makes so much sense to get insurance when you're young. Doesn't mean when you get older not to get it, but it's why we in the insurance industry typically stress getting it when you're young. Health. Your current health and medical history matter. The healthier you are, the better the premium. Sex. Women tend to live longer than men, so premiums are often a little lower for women. Coverage amount. The more coverage you want, the higher the premiums can be because you're insuring a larger amount. Tobacco use. Smoking, not smoking. If you stop smoking and you previously smoked, on that application, they're going to ask you, how long ago did you stop smoking? They're also going to ask about marijuana. It's not necessarily classified as the same, but they are going to ask about it, and they're going to, it doesn't automatically put you as a smoker on that application, right? So always be upfront. And for anyone underage, marijuana use is an automatic denial. I want to check the chat for a minute before we go on. Yeah, someone said they had to start over at 40 years old, never again. Does each life insurance policy have a 2-year waiting period, meaning something happens within the first years? No, that's just on that the typical guaranteed issue policy. Regular, home life term, those don't have that 2 year waiting period. That guaranteed issue is typically because people who are have some health challenges, right? Um, and let's just be clear, the insurance company wants to see you live for 2 years before they'll pay out on that death benefit. And that's why I love the fact that we can offer that whole life with long-term care that doesn't have a wait period. And they don't have a wait period because there's nothing to contest in those 2 years because they're not asking any medical questions or not asking any or taking any medical exam. So no, not all policies have that 2 year. Um, yeah, what exact policy is the one that they talk about to be your own bank? That's one of those permanent policies that are building cash value, right? So you can do that with an IUL, which is index universal life. You also can do it with a fixed universal life where the rate on the money that's the cash value that's growing is fixed instead of based on an index. Elantra, I got you. Oh, you all were already putting them in the chat. So let's keep going because if the structure is not in place, the protection can fall apart. So these are some added things that we look at when we start talking about legacy planning, right? That will is a legal document that states your wishes for how your assets and property should be distributed after you pass. But let me be clear, having a will does not mean your family avoids probate. There are ways to avoid probate, but a will alone is not one of them. What that will does is it makes sure that your assets are distributed how you want and not how the state law decides. And that's the thing that matters. If you die without a will, now, this is not talking about if you've had trust accounts and all of that. This is just for those who may or may not have a will and nothing else in place. If you die without a will, your estate has to go to probate. And if there is no agreement among the heirs, the judge has to distribute the property based off that state law. So you see how important that will or trust, which we're going to talk about in a minute, becomes very, very important, right? And even when somebody says, yeah, but I don't have a whole lot, that's fine. But we still don't want the courts and the attorneys to get any of it, right? So that's where that will really helps, and other things that you put into place. Power of attorney. Listen and listen good on this one. Powers of attorney is a legal document that allows someone to you trust to make decisions on your behalf, financial, legal, and even medical, right? This is a very, very important document. And so if you're assigning medical power of attorney, one thing that I want to say and I want you to understand, you want to make sure that the person that you're assigning that power of attorney to understands your wishes and will follow through with whatever wishes you have. And sometimes that person might not be the one that's closest to you. You may be, have grown children, and let's say you don't have a spouse. Those grown children, one might be like, no, you say you don't want to be on life support, but they could not, out of the love that they have for you, take you off life support. So you got to make sure that the person that you pick for this is willing to do your wishes, because love does not always equal the ability to execute those wishes. And if you have children, once they turn 18, you no longer automatically have the right to make these decisions for them. So, financial, that medical power of attorney, you want to make sure it's in place for them. Because if something happens, you want the answer to already be clear about who's making those decisions for you. And here's the other thing. So often we wait until we need a thing. I had someone call me at one point saying, hey, you know where we can get a power of attorney done? And I said, yeah, but tell me the situation. Well, they needed a power of attorney for her, call the person her stepdad. He raised her. There was no blood. There was nothing else, right? He was in the hospital. There was no one else there to make the decisions. She could not make the decisions because he was in the hospital and he was not in a position where he could sign a power of attorney. So you always want to make sure you have these things in place. If you have any type of legal shield or anything like that through your employer, check, because you can get them done for free. I'm also a legal shield agent because things like this are important. That link is also going to be in the chat. You can get your legal shield membership and they will do your wills and powers of attorney for free. And we know we all like free. So a deed transfer, it is a legal process on transferring ownership of real estate from one person to another. And so here's a great example of being able to skip the probate process on real estate. So my dad passed in 2017. My parents owned their house free and clear, and after my dad passed, mom added me to the deed. So that means the home never has to go to probate because I already legally own it with my mother, right? And so there's also something called a ladybird deed. So let's say you have grown children and they at some point want to buy a house and they might be interested in getting some sort of down payment assistance to help in that purchase. Down payment assistance in first time home buyer says you cannot have ownership in a property within the last 3 years. So if that were the case for me and my mom put me on that property, well, I'm on the deed, so that means I have ownership in a property. But that ladybird deed allows you to do that deed transfer and it actually comes into place. So you file it, right, with the county and the state, you file it, but then it doesn't take into effect. Your name is not actually put on the deed until the death of the person who is who's deeding you that property, right? And so you then would just take that death certificate down to the county and they would add you to the deed. And in that case, again, that ladybird deed keeps the options open while still protecting the transfer. Trust accounts. It's a legal structure where you transfer your assets to be managed by a trust account. So you can put your house in a deed. The trust can be the beneficiary on your life insurance policies, right? And no two trust accounts are going to be the same. And this is where things become very, very intentional. This is where you begin to truly think about generations. Because with the right structure, you can build a strategy using life insurance and trust together to ensure that your legacy and the wealth tied to it is protected, controlled, and passed down the way you decide. And decisions are made after you're gone based off of what you put into that trust, right? So there will be people, if you do this thing right, there can be people in your family who will never meet you, but they will know your name because of what you set up after this webinar tonight. So if something happened to you tomorrow, which one of these things would your family be missing? And how soon are you going to work to get them in place? So the question becomes, what's the path forward? Because you can't unhear all of this that you've heard tonight. You cannot unknow all of what you know tonight. And the goal tonight was never just awareness. It was all about activation. So if you know me, you know you always going to have homework when you deal with me. So let's talk about that path forward. First, you're going to complete the diagnostic tool. The link is not in the chat. You will get an email tomorrow with that diagnostic link. And it's the diagnostic tool that I created, right? It helps make things a little easier. So what you do is you're going to put all your information that it asks you in this diagnostic tool. And that diagnostic tool is then going to take that information and make suggestions for you, right? Personalized suggestions for you on what type of policies you should consider, as well as where your immediate gaps are that need to be filled. So it's not pressure, it's not prescriptions, it's just suggestions. And it will show you again what needs attention now, what can be done over time, and which type of policies you may consider. So you'll get a copy of your results. And guess what? The copy of the results come to me too. So when you schedule your consultation with me, we're not starting from scratch. We do have some clarity. And again, it will be emailed to you tomorrow with a copy with a link to the replay of this webinar. So what's next? Review your current policies. Y'all, today, tomorrow, within the next 24 hours, pull out your life insurance policies and even look at the one that you have through work that you may not have a copy of. Pull those policies out, review them. Are they still active? Do you know where they are? And most importantly, does someone else know where they are? They don't necessarily have to have a physical copy of the policy, but they need to know the company and who to call if they need to get those benefits. Because the last thing your family should be doing while grieving is searching for information. So you want to make sure that they have access to that information. And then please review the beneficiaries. Make sure they're up to date and correct, and that you have more than one. And so why do I say have more than one? Someone that I know, her relative, her cousin, is this young lady was, they were all in their early 30s. Early 30s, she went on vacation. She passed while traveling. And she did have life insurance. Her mother was the only beneficiary, but her mother had passed a year prior. So the exact moment that the family needed the money the most, they couldn't access it because the policy became part of the estate because the mother died before the daughter and there was no other beneficiary. And then the estate had to go through probate. And probate takes as long as probate takes, right? So the next one is schedule your consultation. That link is in the chat. And I will put these links in there again, but that link is in the chat. Schedule a consultation. Let's talk about what you learned tonight and turn it into a plan that actually fits your life, the life that you want to live, and the life that you want to leave, right? And then get your documents in place. Again, where are they? You've reviewed them. Where are they? Where's that list? Like I have a list. I don't have the physical documents for my mother. I don't need the physical documents, but I have a list of what's where, right? Who I need to call when that time comes. Because one thing I know for sure, the time is going to come for everyone. And then have the conversations, y'all. I know sometimes they are difficult, but have the conversations. Talk to the people that you love. Let them know what's in place, where things are, and what your wishes are. This is not inviting death, because I've heard that in our community, like, oh God, I don't want to talk about it. That means I'm going to die. No, it does not mean that. So this is not inviting in death. This is responsibility. It's care, because silence has cost our community far too much. And then finally, share. Share what you learned tonight, especially if something shifted for you, if something opened up for you. Don't keep it for yourself. Remember, community, gathering, gather with your family and talk about these things. Tell the people that you love, your friends, your families, right? Share this with those people because they deserve to be protected too. And so I want us to gather one more time into the conversation. I'm sorry, into the chat. How does this differ from any life insurance conversation or education you've had before? What shifted for you tonight? And what do you believe now that you did not believe when you tuned in? Drop those answers in the chat. This helps me in the work that I do. And it helps you too, because it helps you put words to feelings and emotions that you're having. And so as you take your next step in healing and on your path to liberation, all of this helps. So drop it in the chat. Absolutely. Preparing is not inviting bad things. Thinking beyond the depth. This was more in depth than I thought and thought provoking. Yeah, I don't ever come with with surface stuff because all of these things that we don't know, that we feel, and we can't even put a name to it, all of that's showing up in our money story. We don't know why we operate the way that we do. We don't know that the reason why in our community not enough of us have life insurance is because of the history that's been tied to us, that's been coded and installed in your DNA. And what has been installed can be uninstalled. And the only way it gets uninstalled is through awareness and healing. And so I'm so glad Zoom users said they're more informed. It was confirming what I already knew. I asked for the correct alignment, and this accidentally came across. So thanks. I will speaking with you soon. Listen, nothing happens by accident. You said it right the first time. It was alignment. I did. I gave you a lot of information. Um, I know. And you got it all at once. I know. You did. You got it all at once. But that's the other thing. Like depending upon who you talk to, other agents, and I'm not downing and playing everything. That's why I say this is the way that I work. The more information that you have, the better and the wiser decisions that you can make. And so it's about information, awareness, and strategy. You can't create a strategy when you just know about one or two products. You have, and it's not for somebody to tell you what products will work for your strategy, right? Um, the details about the insurance policy. Oh, thank you. Different because you were able to follow along with the visuals. I'm a visual learner. Yeah. Listen, y'all, I worked hard on those visuals too, as you can tell. Yes, definitely education on a different level. I'm glad you're here. And I love that. Somebody said their father has been planning his death for the last 50 years and regularly makes me go over where the documents are, who to call. I have to adopt this philosophy as I have been very lax. Absolutely. And I would like to say he's been planning his legacy, right? For the last 50 years, as opposed to planning his death. But yeah, the conversations are had, and it's not something that you have to have often, but things change, right? And if we don't go back and review them, we get stuck in when we need them, we don't know where they are. Thank you, Barbara. This was the liberation for you. That is my goal and my point, to help financially liberate my people. That's my purpose. Um, yeah, long-term care with the insurance policy, it is a great benefit. And just a side note, this particular policy is with the whole life with long-term care that we have through the Amazing Woman Network, the cancer policy, and the critical illness policy is through Allstate, and Allstate was recently purchased, and I cannot remember the name of who purchased them. However, it was through Allstate, and it is the only policy out there that has no that is truly guaranteed issue, has no health questions or medical exams, and Allstate didn't just come up with it themselves. There was a black man, right, who he went to some other carriers too, but he went to Allstate and he said he wanted a true guaranteed issue policy, and they agreed and they wrote the policy. And so for me, it's extra special to be able to help people who need these policies, but also because this policy is because a black man said that he wanted it for his community. So you can't call Allstate and get it. You got to go through the Amazing Woman Network. And yeah, bringing the unconscious to conscious. Heal and educate. You're most welcome. Can a ladybird deed and a trust be combined or completed together? Yes. Absolutely. And I'm going to then tell you direct all of your specific trust questions to a trust person. You also, remember I talked about the wills, the powers of attorney through Legal Shield. You also can get your trust through them as well. They not going to do it for free, but it will start out as low as $250. And trust me, when you start talking about trust accounts, that is a steal. And it's not by somebody, attorneys working out of the trunk of their car. Like locally here in Michigan, it's Powers Chapman out of Troy. So these are real accredited, law offices that you get to work with for these things. Yes. What shifted for me is that I need to make a plan soon. No more procrastinating. But now you also understand that that procrastination isn't just because you don't know, because you're lazy, because you don't want to do it. It's things that's been coded and installed in you that that you hesitate about it. Not to mention your nervous system. If you haven't done it before, your nervous system is saying, hey, 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 wait, what you doing? Right? Because the job of our nervous system is to protect us. And it protects us from those new things that you're doing, not because those new things, it doesn't matter that those new things are better for you, they're not familiar. And your nervous system recognizes familiar as safe. So sometimes you have to have somebody walking you through this or walking with it through you so that you can quote unquote trick your nervous system to get it done and stop procrastinating, right? Um, so if tonight moves you, imagine doing this work every single day. Y'all can tell I absolutely love what I do. So, a couple of things. If you are interested in becoming an organizer for the financial liberation movement, let's talk about it. Doesn't matter where you are, let's talk about it. And if you ever thought about becoming a life insurance agent, or if you already are one and want to work with me, again, doesn't matter where you are, let's chat about it. Schedule that consultation with me. The link is going to be in the chat as well. I would love to collaborate and build with you. And if you simply just want to stay connected, you are interested in this whole financial liberation movement piece that we are building, and you want to know and be in the loop on what's coming next, that link is in the bio too, that you can just put your name on that list. And if y'all register, I got your emails too, so you don't get all type of other stuff as well. But specifically for that liberation movement, put your name on that list. And so your ancestors survived everything they threw at them so that you could be here tonight. And now is your turn to make sure your lineage survives everything that comes next.
Mm.
And so if something shifted for you,